I don't think I'll ever forget the first time a teenager asked me if they were going to hell. I'd been in my job as the youth programs director at ROSMY for a few months, working with lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning youth. And I was visiting a local high school's gay-straight alliance to tell them a bit about ROSMY. My idea was that I would tell them about our various support groups, maybe see if there was any interest in our leadership program. I only mentioned in passing that I'd been to seminary and that I was in the process of becoming a pastor. Somehow, in sharing this, I had unintentionally sold myself as someone who had the authority to speak to the nature of someone's eternal soul. Now, I can say without any doubt that there is nothing inherent to our identities that relegates us to hell. I was totally thrown off by this question. It takes a lot of guts to ask a question like that. Trust me, I know. Because as a teenager, it's the kind of question that I never had the guts to ask. Like a lot of queer youth today, I spent much of my teenage years navigating a system that was built for someone else. High school dances were exclusively male-female couples. Girls wore makeup and talked about their crushes. Bathrooms and locker rooms were spaces where gender norms and expectations were reinforced. And while I never really felt like I was betraying any part of my identity by participating in any of these activities, it wasn't until years later that I was able to see how much my desire to be seen and to belong influenced the way I lived in the world. You could say I took kind of a fake it till you make it approach to life, thinking that if I worked hard enough and tried hard enough to be the right kind of girl, then eventually I would be. One of the few places that I felt safe to be myself, even while staying within the confines of the closet, was church. It was at church that I learned that it was okay to ask questions, that it was okay to be my goofy, sometimes awkward self. It was at church that I was cared for by adults who weren't my parents and who encouraged me to live into my beliefs as I saw them doing it when they were teaching Sunday school or taking us on youth trips or directing youth choir. The people in my hometown church encouraged me to ask questions. They asked me tough questions, and then they listened when I answered. They taught me what it was to be part of a faith community. Now, I worked hard through high school. I made good grades. I had a close group of core friends. I participated in a number of different extracurricular activities. I played the part on the surface of the all-American teenager really, really well. Underneath it, though, I carried with me a deeply buried sense of shame about my identity. And the funny thing about shame is that it can be very easy to hide. So, while I could smile through just about anything, underneath I was terrified and can remember thinking that I would rather be dead than have someone know that I was queer. I carried that shame with me all the way to seminary. Though I'd been out for years by that time, I was still standing somewhere in a space between exhilaration and terror. Exhilaration because I was excited about what would happen when I started digging into biblical texts. And terror because I was freaked out, honestly, that once I started doing that excavation, I would find that my worst fears were true, and that my identity relegated me to the bounds of grace at best, or at worst, outside the bounds of grace altogether. So, you might imagine my delight and surprise when I found the opposite to be true. I didn't find condemnation within the text of my tradition. What I found was a message of reconciliation and hope, particularly for those who had been told that they were outcast or unclean. The issue wasn't with the texts. The issue was with ways that they had been misused, utilized to reinforce very carefully constructed boundaries between who was in and who was out. the thing about those boundaries that define us and them, the clean and the unclean, the holy and the damned, those are human-made boundaries. In the summer of 2011, the Presbyterian Church USA, the denomination I'm a part of, ratified changes to its constitution, opening up the way for LGBTQ people to be ordained. Now, as you might expect, not everyone was equally excited about these changes. And a number of people, both on the individual and the congregational level, left the denomination. Among those who left was 75% of the people from my home congregation. And within that 75% was the bulk of people who had been most influential in my faith formation. So, the people who taught me what it was to be church, and who showed me the love of a faith community as I was growing up, left the denomination when LGBTQ people like me, could be ordained. Now, I started working at ROSMY in 2013. I interned there during my final year of seminary 2 years before. The same year, the PCUSA opened up its ordination standards. The same year, my home congregation split up. It seemed especially poignant that the place that I had found most comfortable as a teenager was in the midst of a breakup, while I was meeting teenagers who were sharing their stories from church, many of which had been more damaging than my own. So while I would get stories from home about things people were saying about LGBTQ people, that they were an abomination or unrepentant sinners, or about what a terrible move the denomination was making in changing its ordination standards, I was meeting teenagers who had been told that they were an abomination, or that they were going to hell, or who had been kicked out of their homes and their churches in the name of God. Now, while there was no direct overlap between these two communities, there were times it felt as though the youth that I was meeting had had the ground pulled out from under their feet, and the people who taught me what it was to be church were the ones doing the pulling. I'd be lying if I said I've never had my heart broken by the church. There are days when I feel as if I might crumble under the weight of things that are said and done in the name of God. And any ideas we might have about being able to authentically live in community with one another seem like nothing more than naive pipe dreams. In the same way, there are days when I am bogged down by the work I do at ROSMY, when I feel like I can't handle one more conversation about suicidal ideation or bullying, or hear one more youth tell me that they have been told that they're going to hell. The distance between where we are and where we need to be is just too great. The work is just too hard. However, it often seems that it's particularly on those days that I am reminded of just how awesome it is to get to do the work that I get to do. Sometimes those reminders come in the form of a youth calling to tell me that they've just come out to all of their friends at school and it went really well. Other days, it's in a youth stopping in during our drop-in hours, who's been busy for a while and hasn't been able to be in one of our support groups, and he was feeling homesick. Other days, it's in the pastor of a local church calling because someone in their youth group has just come out, and the pastor wants to make sure that the church is a safe space for that youth. It's actually exactly what I did when they called. I could focus all day long on the 75% of people who left my home congregation, in the same way that I could focus all day long on the sometimes overwhelming circumstances LGBTQ youth face. But in doing so, I am turning my gaze away from the 25% of people who stayed, and who in many ways are bonded together more tightly because of what they've gone through. They know the ground they stand on and who they want to be in the world. In the same way, a number of the youth at ROSMY have bonded together more tightly because of the difficult circumstances they've been through. In a world that moves between antagonistic, indifferent, and complacently silent, ROSMY offers LGBTQ youth the opportunity that many of them don't have anywhere else, the opportunity to belong. Time and again, youth come to ROSMY and bloom, empowered through a process of self-discovery that allows them to open up to the world around them, building friendships and serving as leaders and mentors for future youth who come in. They too know the ground they stand on and who they want to be in the world. A few weeks ago in group, we had the youth design symbols that represented their identity, and then attach those symbols to capes. So, at the end of group, the youth donned their capes and shared their superhero identities, did their best superhero poses. And I gotta say, y'all, standing in a room full of teenagers wearing capes, it was awesome. Also made a cape for myself, which was awesome. And it wasn't awesome because of the materials or the capes themselves, right? They were made from donated fabric, and the symbols were cut out kind of quickly and attached kind of clumsily. But it was awesome because I was standing in a room full of teenagers, and you could see it on their faces. They were proud of who they are. I think a lot about what faith communities might learn from places like ROSMY. What would it be like if, first and foremost, our faith communities were places where we knew that we could be honored, respected, and loved? What would it be like if we celebrated our individuality and saw that as an opportunity to be part of something more? What would it be like if we admitted that we don't have all the answers and that that's okay? And that it was okay to show our scars and to bear one another's burdens? Might that give way to empathy and to trust, even transformation? It's a bit naive, I know, but I like to think that it would. Might we then also realize that we are all, in our imperfectly beautiful humanity, superheroes?